Let's be careful before we dump on King Solomon or the preacher or the teacher. Let's be careful not to pretend that we can't in some way identify with what he's feeling. Let's not too quickly tune out all he might say to us through this text, not realizing that it's how he starts out, but it's not how he'll finish. Let's at least acknowledge that this writer is articulating some of the things that you and I have felt but have not said. That his examination of problems, his examination of things that hurt, that frighten us, that scare us, that create doubt, is not unique to him, but it is the story of us all. All of us, at one time or another, have raised the question, is life really worth living? Once or twice, we've gotten caught up in the ebb and flow of mediocrity and the mundane. And we've asked ourselves, what is the point? Is life really worth living? And I want to tag this. This is something that I didn't do earlier, but I want to use it as a teachable moment. Think about this with me. There are two kinds of doubt. There is doubt that is honest, and there is doubt that is dishonest. You see, dishonest doubt has a way of being proud and haughty and assuming it knows everything. Dishonest doubt is lazy, because dishonest doubt is nothing more than a mechanism that refuses to think. Dishonest doubt sounds like this: that's crazy. Dishonest doubt sounds like this: that's stupid. This dishonest doubt sounds like that's impossible. Because dishonest doubt is a refusal to think that there's any other way other than your own. And it's proud, and it's lazy, and it doesn't want to think. And everybody sometimes has experienced dishonest doubt. But honest doubt is a way of humility. It's a way of asking questions and allowing not the walls to go up, but to come down so that you might really receive information and understand. You see, the declaration, the words that come out of your mouth, that's stupid, is an assertion, not an argument. That means I really don't want to know anything other than what I think I know. Come on, stay awake. That's stupid, that's impossible, that's crazy. That's a wall going up of assertion, not a conversation. That says, I'm right, I know what I know, and you don't know anything. And that's a commitment to refuse to think and have honest doubt. You see, honest doubt can be healing and helpful. In fact, in Luke 1, there's a time when Mary is visited by an angel, and she raises the question, can these things be? And the end result of that is one of the most famous lines in Scripture, that with God, nothing shall be impossible. But that's the result of her honest doubt. And if you never have honest doubts, you never position yourself to grow or get great answers. And so the king is not outside of the pale of raising honest doubts that we all have. It is incredible for me to sometimes hear Christian people think and assume that somehow we've got it on lock. We don't. And right now, Solomon is in a posture. Verse 1 says that he was the teacher. Some translations will say he was the preacher. He is obviously associated and connected to the royal family, and most would agree that it is Solomon, but we don't know that to be absolutely sure. What we know is that he's associated with the royal household to some degree. He is the person who stands in the midst of the assembly. This is what the word preacher, teacher would mean here in this text. That he stands in the midst of the assembly to instruct or to convene or to advise or to guide or to chase. But he's got some questions here. And in spite of his rank, in spite of his posture, he comes to this place where he's got some honest questions. Listen, this is not a book about what it means to be pessimistic. It's a book about what it means to be realistic. To say sometimes I don't know where I'm headed, and God, I don't know what you're doing, and I wish I knew. Look at what he's examining. He's trying to examine what is the distinction between rich and poverty? What's the distinction between life and death? What's the distinction between abused, misused, and raised to a position of prominence? He's raising good questions. And sometimes in life, you can learn more if you develop the capacity to ask good questions than give good answers. Sometimes the best thing you can do with your life is learn to ask better questions and not be the answer man. Because that's how you grow. And when you're afraid to ask good questions, it stymies, it hinders the capacity to grow. He's looking in some places. And the reason why we are saddened and feel like Solomon is because he's looking in places perhaps where the answers are still missing a main ingredient. Stay with me. Look at the text. He says in verse 3, what do people get for all their hard work under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth never changes. The sun rises and the sun sets, then hurries around to rise again. The wind blows south and then turns north. Around and around it goes, blowing in circles. Rivers run into the sea, but the sea is never full. Then the water returns again to the rivers and flows out again to the sea. Everything is wearisome beyond description. No matter how much we see, we are never satisfied. And no matter how much we hear, we are not content. Look here in verse 9, and you'll see a shift in the text. He says, history merely repeats itself. It has all been done before. Nothing under the sun is truly new. Sometimes people say, here is something new, but actually it is old. Nothing is ever truly new. We don't remember what happened in the past, and in future generations, no one will remember what we are doing now. Notice where he's begun his investigation. He's begun his examination, his investigation in the wrong places. Here's what he's done, and sometimes what we do. When you spend all of your time looking around you, you see, Solomon is studying nature and looking at nature, and he's looking at the wind, he's looking at the waves, he's looking at the sun, he's looking at the stars and the moon. And when you spend sometimes too much of your time looking around you, it will leave you depressed. Because when you look around you, you always find somebody either better than you or lower than you. And it serves as a platform for either enormous pride or despair. Sometimes looking around you is the wrong place to be looking if you're looking for answers. Because in looking around you, you can be bombarded with so much stuff that tells you where you think you are, and that perception is wrong. He has spent so much time looking around that it has left him in a debilitating posture because he spent all his time looking around. But then he left looking around and he decided to look back. That's why I called you to verse 9, because sometimes studying your history is the worst thing you can do. Because you start to look at where you've been and who you were, and if you keep playing that tape without realizing there's a God who brought you to this moment and who wants to take you further than where you are, you can become melancholy and sullen because you keep looking at your past. Sometimes you got to forget about what's behind you and press forward to what's ahead of you, realizing, yes, I used to be that, but I ain't that no more, because God has done something new in my life. And even when people don't want to let you forget it, you've got to stop looking backwards and start looking forward and saying, by God's grace, I will make it under his power. He spent time looking around. Now he's been looking backwards. And no wonder he says everything is meaningless. Sometimes you, like Paul, you got to forget about those things that are behind you and look forward to those things that are ahead. I like the way Walker said it. He said sometimes you got to forget the mess and keep the press. If you don't, it'll bring you down every time. And God knows there's enough stuff in all of our luggage. Only a few people say amen. Let me say it one more time. There's enough stuff in all of our baggage that if we were to start throwing stuff out on the roadway, the pathway to where we are now would be littered with such junk and debris and useless stuff. That's why I'm glad goodness and mercy follow me all the days of my life. You know why I need goodness and mercy to follow me? Because they're like street sweepers, moving my garbage out of the way so that I stop looking back at what's wrong and can keep going forward to what's ahead. Solomon can't discover the meaning of life and the richness of life for looking around and looking behind him. But then he decides he'll take another examination and he looks inward. That's why verse 12, I the teacher was king of Israel and lived in Jerusalem. I devoted myself to search for understanding and to explore wisdom. By wisdom, everything being done under heaven. I soon discovered that God has dealt a tragic existence to the human race. I observed everything going on under the sun, and really, it is all meaningless, like chasing the wind. What is wrong cannot be made right. What is missing cannot be recovered. And notice that Solomon has gone from the external, outside look to the behind him look. Now he's looking inside. He's looking inwardly. And sometimes the inward look can be a greater place of despair, and at the launching place for deliverance. Because once you get the inside right, you can finally go somewhere. Until you get the inside right, you keep thinking all your problems are external, when it's really you. I was thinking about this because I told you this is a part of my own sort of private devotion. I've been working through the book of Ecclesiastes, not to preach, but we're here now, right? And I was thinking about this because one of the things that I've not always understood is why sometimes you can say the same thing and there are 10 people in the room and 3 people get it and change and 7 don't. And so sometimes I wonder to myself, what's my problem? And then the Lord says, no, you forgot that there is a little narrative that the master taught us. It's about the seed and the soil. And sometimes you get frustrated because you're trying to talk to people and you're trying to tell people what you know is good for them. And you keep thinking that somehow you're messing up. That if you could say it another way, if you could be more creative, if you could do this, if you could do that, then they would get it. But sometimes it's not the seed that's got the problem. You see, when Jesus was teaching us that parable, he was saying that the seed is the same seed. The problem is the condition of the soil on which the seed falls. And if the soil is not right, it doesn't matter what kind of seed is deposited. If the soil is not the right, Lord, I wish I had a witness. If the soil is not the right soil, then no matter what seed is sown, it still won't grow. You know what you're dealing with sometimes? It's a soil problem. How come they won't hear? How come they won't change? How come they won't listen? Well, it ain't you, it's them. Sometimes the problem is with the soil, and until the soil, in our tradition, black farmers would come out in the morning and stick their hands in the soil. My grandfather would say, it ain't ready yet. And he could tell that it wasn't time for planting because the soil wasn't right yet. And they would watch the weather and the climatic conditions to know that now we should plant. Why? Because the soil is now ready to receive the seed. And if you put good soil in bad, if you put good seed in bad soil, that's why you got to be encouraged. Because see, when Jesus taught us the parable of sowing the seed, he taught us that in the ancient world, they'd go into a little sort of sack and they'd take 2 handfuls out and they just fling it. And go back into the sack and just fling it. And what happens is, if you spend all your time looking for a result, you can't keep sowing. And our job is not to discover what the condition of the soil is. Our job is just to be good sowers of the seed. And so you say, how come you don't get tired? Because my job is to just keep sowing, sowing, sowing. You say, well, how come they don't listen, my son, my daughter, whoever? Well, you just keep sowing, keep sowing. You say, how come my husband hasn't changed? Just keep sowing and sowing. You say, how come my boss is still acting like a hellion? Just keep sowing and sowing and sowing. Your job is not to moderate the soil, it's to sow the seed. And if you just sow the seed, there's a harvest that you'll reap to his glory, but you got to sow the seed. There's this condition that is internal, and it allows us to see some things that we can't see once we realize that the problem is mine. And here's what he says. He says, well, no, there's nothing new under the sun. Well, Solomon, all due respect, I know you king, but you've missed this. This is why you've got to read the entire book of Ecclesiastes to realize that he begins one way, but he doesn't end like that. You see, because the truth is, Solomon, there's some things that were new that you forgot about. Have you ever read the book of Joshua, King Solomon? Because in Joshua chapter 10, there was a day when Joshua was leading an army to fight. And he prayed, God, if you just hold the sun up, keep the light from descending. If you just, listen, the way it's been described is that the sun stood still. That was God stepping into his creation to do something new that he had not done before. You see, Joshua was going to fight, and listen, the way we've described it is that the text in Joshua 10 says the sun stood still. Let me tell you something. The sun has never moved. It's the earth that spins 23 degrees on its axis. Oh, come on, help me preach. And so what God did was God put the brakes on the earth. And it looked like the sun was standing still. But all God did was stop the sphere from moving. Now, if he can do that, then what situation do you think you're a part of that God can't do a new thing in, change, and transform? That's why you have hope. Because this is the God I serve. The one who could stop the earth, make the sun look like it's standing still. How come you think he can't handle your boss or your supervisor or your cousin or your husband or your wife? He can do anything, and a new thing he can do. This is why Peter says, I want you to realize something, that you're looking at this idea of a God who operates in the veil of human history and in his creation according to his desire and design. And he can do some things that are new that you've not seen before. This is a God who operates in a way that allows us to grow and makes life worth living if we'll add the ingredients he says we should add. Here's the way 2 Peter 3 said it. Pastor Marshall said it well. He says that I want you to grow in grace and in knowledge. So you need both. You need grace. That's why Peter puts that first. He says you want to grow in the grace and the knowledge of our Lord. You see, there are some things that have to go together. You know, for quiet as it's kept, I am a junk food junkie. Well, let me put it this way. I'm a recovering junk food junkie. because there's something about the Oreos, either chocolate or vanilla, that around about 9:30 they start calling me. And my problem is I can't eat one. I've tried to eat one cookie, but then there's 3 others that just call my name, and then I can hear the rest of the pack say, "Dan, Dan." Some about the cookie that just drives me nuts. And then I decided that one day I was going to get healthy, and I started eating pistachio nuts. But I like the ones that have sea salt and black pepper, because I'd rather suck on the shell. But I discovered something, that every now and then I'll go into a box of Oreos or a bag of pistachios, and after I'm done sucking on that shell, there's no nut in the middle. I'm not sure how you feel about cookies, but if I get an Oreo and there's no white cream in the center, I'm ready to write somebody, because it ain't an Oreo if it don't have that white. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. That if that white sweet stuff ain't in the middle, it ain't a cookie that I want, because Oreos and that center go together. Well, Peter was saying that you can't have one or the other. You've got to have both grace and you've got to have knowledge. But the problem is that Satan is always trying to sell us on knowledge without grace and without the wisdom of God. This was the knowledge trap in the book of Genesis. There's a tree called the tree of knowledge. What does Satan say? Well, listen, here's what I want you to have: knowledge, but without God. Have all the knowledge you want, but just don't let God be a part of it. That's why as you make your way back to campuses and you make your way back to schools, always be sifting your learning through the Word of God. Because without the grace of God through His Word, the knowledge you acquire, if all you get is just knowledge, it makes you fit to become a menace to society. The worst person on the planet is a knowledgeable demon without God's presence. And knowledge puffs up, makes you feel like you're somebody. And the grace of God in His Word keeps you low, possessing humility. And that is what makes life worthwhile. You say, what was Solomon's mistake? Knowledge, seeking to understand, examining without God in the mix. Whenever God is not a part of the mix, God is always jealous. That's why I'm always amazed, because people want to be unified. But here's what you need to know. Whenever you try to unify without God, it will be God resisting the unification, not Satan. That's what the whole Genesis Tower of Babel episode is about. How dare you try to unify without me? Somebody said, well, that's the devil. No, the devil don't come at stuff like that. The devil supports that. It is God that resists unification without Him. It is God that resists the acquisition of knowledge without Him. Because He realizes that knowledge can tell you how to make nuclear weapons, but knowledge can't tell you how to use them. You need God. And so, this is the dilemma. And this is the challenge for us that makes life worthwhile. God is in, God is center. And Peter would say, I want you to grow in grace. First, I want you to grow in knowledge. Otherwise, you will live a cynical, cold, critical, complaining life without the grace of God. And it really won't be life, because without Him, there is no life. John 14:6. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Life is life because of Him. Without Him, there's no such thing as life. In fact, when you read Proverbs 4 as well as Proverbs 8, You're gonna see God give wisdom a female personage. Wisdom is standing there. Proverbs 8 would say, as if she was standing with God when God was in the design room for creation. Wisdom said, at the beginning of time, he held me fast. I was there when he called the circle of the world into existence. I was there when he flung the stars in the ebony bosom of midnight. I was there when God was creating all this thing. Wisdom says, I stood right next to him. Wisdom says, you know what, when I wanted to figure out who I was supposed to be, I had to ask God to tell me. God told love what to be. God told life what to be. God told wisdom what to be. Everything has to run to God for its job description. They say, tell us who we supposed to be. And without Jesus, there's no life, there's no light, there's no knowledge, there's no understanding. But with Jesus, life is worth living. Life makes sense with Christ. And if you're struggling or wrestling with honest doubt, just know that until you allow Christ inside, your struggle is perpetual. He will make the difference. He'll help to answer the questions of why, the questions of when, who, and even if he doesn't answer the questions, he'll give you a peace that surpasses understanding.